Mark and everyone. So I'm Karen Feldman. I'm thrilled to be here participating with Brand Innovators and part of their community. This is the first time we're here partnering at Cannes, so we're so excited to be hosting the Armani Cafe. Our lineup, what we are doing every morning, 10 a.m., is croissants and conversations. So we're hoping you will all join us to get started, for your day every morning for a little bit of content, some great food, some great coffee, conversation. We're starting here this morning with a topic we thought we would just warm you all up with something boring and then move on to the more exciting topics. So we're going to start this morning with generative AI. So I've got a wonderful group of panelists here with me, each with their own interesting perspectives. And there's a lot of different directions we could take this conversation over the next 25 minutes. But what we thought we would do is talk a bit about the opportunity that we see in marketing around generative AI, what we believe it's going to take for us to scale generative AI for the enterprise. I think it's fair to say we have all our imaginations have been captured with generative AI and what we've been able to do. When you look at most of the research that is out there, including our own, the general perspective is marketing is going to be the top use case, the fastest use case where we're going to see generative AI applied. Some of the stats, McKinsey published something last week that said when you look at the customer experience functions, sales, marketing, customer operations, coupled with product development and software development, that's 75% of the enterprise value. There's also a lot of debate around what's really going to drive the value creation. Is it revenue increase? Is it new business models? Is it productivity in the way we work? Some combination, of all of that. Our research of 200 CMOs last week suggested that 67% want to move quickly. Right, so they're expecting they'll adopt generative AI within the next year. But there's a lot of barriers that need to be addressed to make sure we're doing that in a way that's safe for the brand. So what we'd like to do is unpack that a little bit now, and we'll leave about 5 minutes towards the end of the discussion for questions from any of you from the audience, and then we'll want to continue the conversation. So I'm going to start by asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves and talk about the opportunity that they see for generative AI. So Billy, do you want to start?
Sure. Hey, everybody. So I'm Billy Seabrook. I'm the Global Chief Design Officer within IBM Consulting, and the IX brand specifically. And I've been with IBM for about 6 years, and I lead the experience design, mobile, and spatial computing practice within the company, which is about 7,000 practitioners around the world. And obviously, generative AI has been a huge topic within my practice, as you can imagine, especially around the advantages of content generation, consolidation, and summarization of content to effectively accelerate the workflow. And I think that's probably the biggest impact is exactly that, is the accelerated workflow, the whole content supply chain just being completely disrupted and accelerated. But then beyond that, it's when the content is produced, it's that whole personalization at scale with customer experiences and employee experiences that is another huge opportunity. And then, beyond that, when the experiences are live, the ability to, what I perceive to happen is this automated experience optimization that's going to take place. So today, there's plenty of analytics platforms that monitor the success of your experience, but eventually those insights that are typically manually consumed and then turned into creative briefs, what have you, will start to sort of automatically get corrected and fixed. And then you're really on autopilot with experiences, which I think is pretty exciting. But happy to talk more.
Excellent. Gordon?
Well, where do you start? Well, I'll start with who I am. My name's Gordon Young, and I'm co-founder and editor-in-chief of The Drum, which is the world's second largest marketing website. And in the words of Avis, being second means we try harder. And one way we try harder is, obviously AI is not new. It's been around for a long, long time. Natural language and large language models, that's new. But AI itself is nothing new, and we have been playing with this for a long time. In fact, back in 2016, the Drum joined forces with IBM, where their Watson technology actually guest edited an entire issue of our magazine. If you want to see that magazine, you'll find it in the AI Museum in Germany, because it was the world's first magazine ever edited by AI. And inside, I think you got a little insight into the potential. So, for example, we had a world exclusive interview with David Ogilvy, which was exclusive because it was his very first interview since he died. David Ogilvy had died in 1999, and working with Watson, we managed to the system ingested all his videos, his books, and we could re-interview him about contemporary topics. And I have to say, I thought David Ogilvy was an old madman, fusty guy. But after re-interviewing him, I actually changed my view on him. His views were still very relevant today. So we asked him, for example, what his views were in terms of the equality in the boardroom. And his point of view on that was absolutely spot on for today's sort of audience. And the other thing we managed to do, and this is another insight into the power of data. People think, not this audience, but people sometimes think data is just your location, your name, your gender, stuff like that, but there's a lot more you give away about yourself. And a good example of that was we actually gave every single reader of the Drum a personality test based on how they write for Twitter. So we looked at all our subscribers, we matched that with their Twitter handles, and we gave every single reader a personality test, and then we put that test on the front of the magazine they received. And to play about with it a bit more, because there's an old game in the UK, I don't know if you guys know it, called Top Trumps. Have you heard of Top Trumps? So basically we played with Top Trumps so people could compete with each other. Are they more empathetic? Are they more intelligent? Stuff like that. So because it was Top Trump, we gave Donald Trump a personality profile as well based on how he uses Twitter. And this was about a year before he was elected. And I tell you something, it gives a really good insight because Donald Trump was off the scale in terms of empathy. He was the most empathetic person of all the thousands of people we had looked at. And I think that gave a really good insight into what people underestimate about Trump. Whatever you think about Trump, he understands other people and his audiences really well. And that was the first time I thought, wow, maybe Trump could win this election, because I don't think people had taken him seriously before that. So we can maybe expand on some of these things, but I won't prattle on anymore. Mark.
I'm Mark Penn, CEO of Stagwell, which is the holding company that I started to build in 2016. We're about 12,000 people now, to really transform marketing. And so at the forefront of that effort, and I was coming from being Chief Strategy Officer at Microsoft, was really the application of technology to marketing. Now, first, let me just say that, they come up with generative AI and the first thing they think they're going to get rid of marketing. Okay? I don't think so. Where's your driverless car? How's that working for you? Okay? People still reign supreme, right? And so don't kid yourself. Computers can collect the tolls and run the elevators, but there are limits to how good it's going to be. And the most important limit is that it works with the data that you give it, right? And so it can't come up with that incredibly new insight that pushes forward. That's new data that it can analyze and move forward. Look, at Stagwell, we really are going to use generative AI in three different ways. One is, we are about, close to 2,000 engineers and designers. And so we're going to apply, every company is going to say, how do I apply generative AI to my business? And so that's, thank God, going to create a lot of work. Just as people were wondering, like, how many more websites can you build? How many more apps can you make? Well, now you can, I think, bring companies into a whole new area. Second, we are going to look for areas where it's going to be more efficient. Obviously, generative AI can create a storyboard and a Rip-O-Matic, far more conveniently. And so there are going to be savings that in people and labor, but that shouldn't say that it's going to collapse the industry. I looked at when I started doing surveys, we used to bring key punchers and 60 interviews. I figured we used about 60 people. And today to do a survey, I do about 4. But we still do surveys. In fact, we do more surveys than ever. So, but your companies have to progress. And then the third area is in software products that we create and sell. of which we already have a product now called Profit that uses generative AI to help you write a news release. It takes your news release and figures out who's likely to cover it, who's likely to cover it favorably, unfavorably, and then it helps you write the pitches in different areas. And it enables you to do pitches like 30 or 40 an hour that you might have taken 6 or 8 hours to do. And it's the kind of, I think, application of generative AI that you'll see out there. You can try it, prprofit.com, play with it yourself. Thank you.
Great. So really interesting perspectives from the three of you. You know, Billy, you talked about the impact on the workflow and the content supply chain end to end. Gordon, you spoke about the evolution of AI. This is not new, but perhaps generative AI is creating a tipping point in terms of the value that we're going to create. Mark, for you, you're talking about how you engage and advise your clients from everything from the business models to the efficiency that we're going to deliver ourselves, for the agency. What's your perspective on the likely use cases and the implications, for marketing? You touched on this, Mark, in terms of you believe it's going to augment marketers, not replace marketers in what we do. I can tell you at IBM, we always want to do more. There are always more campaigns that we want to produce. There's always more personalization, derivative content that we want to deliver. So we view this quite optimistically in terms of the implications it has and the opportunity it creates for us. How are you feeling? I know there's a lot of discussion around threat, fear versus opportunity. What's your feeling, each of you?
I can go. Well, I think obviously the biggest opportunity that I mentioned earlier is this acceleration of workflow. And then obviously the more content you can put out there's, I guess, one risk that some marketers are going to think about is content saturation. How much is too much content? The value of it being one-to-one is pretty spectacular. And there's going to be sort of it's going to be people are going to be encouraged to put more content out into the various channels. I think that's going to, the implication there is just this, how's that going to affect your internal checks and balances in terms of making sure that the content is on brand. You're hitting all the brand safety requirements that are going out there, especially if you're in this sort of mode of autopilot where all the content is being generated on the fly. How do you police that in the proper ways? So I think that there will be this, trial and error of how fast is too fast, in terms of getting the content out and monitoring it. And then I also think that if there's an expectation that the content is being produced and you can do so much more, you can develop a mobile app now in a day versus 6 months and create all these new platforms and content. Is the demand on the human workers is going to be just too much, and is there this fear of burnout potentially when people are expected to work at 100x the speed that they're used to, and how do you keep that rhythm going? So I think they're going to be, it's going to be a process of figuring out what the right cadence is and what the right level of content is that you put into the market.
Yeah, well, I think we shouldn't kid ourselves. This is absolutely huge, and it's really hard to look at marketing in isolation because this is bigger than marketing. This is going to upend everything across culture to commerce. Already 50% of people have AI in their workflows. They predict about 70% efficiency. So that's effectively, do we need 70% less people? So I think this is going to completely change what we do. There's no doubt about that. I've got one sort of optimistic insight, though I don't believe it's going to replace humanity. It might fundamentally change marketers, but we'll always need humans because artificial intelligence is based on humanity is based on that. And there's been some reassuring studies because obviously at the moment AI works off real human input, but what happens when all input is artificial intelligence? And what they actually find is that the artificial models collapse very quickly if they're based on only other artificial intelligence insights, because the small mistakes and misrepresentations start compounding themselves very, very rapidly. So you get basically a load of nonsense out. So I think we'll always need humanity to make sure there's a pristine flow of human insight and data to keep AI useful. But I think this is going to absolutely transform our industries in ways that is impossible to predict. Absolutely, without a doubt.
Thank you. You know, I like to say that when you look at science fiction, almost everything was predicted except social media. That social media is the one thing I can't find a book where, like, oh, society got all divided because everybody was on some social media device, right? So it's the one thing nobody really expected in terms of its impact. The one thing everybody expected, and is in every science fiction thing, is AI. And it always ends the same way, the complete destruction of the human race at the hands of AI. So are these stories telling you something? Well, they are, right? They all end exactly the same way. And so there is a danger, right? A seen danger. We want to see, yeah, well, I saw the Forbin Project. We should have watched that one. I think that if you look at it, there is a danger, but obviously putting that danger aside, you know, there is an enhancement of the human experience, you know, aided by generative AI. And the question you have to ask in marketing is not, will it be applied to marketing? Of course it will. And of course, you know, large language models, you know, help kind of summarize and write and edit and put into language things that, you know, far more quickly than a lot of people can. Not necessarily better. But if everybody has access to the same tools and everybody gets the same result, is anybody getting ahead, right? So you really have to think about that, because then it comes down to what we call having a private cloud, right? So do you have unique data or information which you're applying generative AI to get an edge? And if you have that and you put that aside, then you're going to get an answer that's different from what everybody else is getting. And so the real gain here is having not just generative AI, but having a unique set of information which works your generative AI to produce a better result. And that's where I think a lot of intellectual energy has got to go.
I'll build on that. You know, I think that that is one of the risks, or one of the fears that people have, is this sort of creative homogeny that could happen. If it's all the same data swirling around, it's basically remixing the same stuff. So I think that's an opportunity for all the creators in the room here, is that, you know, you can always create something new, because it's going to build on that model. So there's still a role for everyone. But, you know, I think building on that idea around data sets, we recently launched a new platform at IBM called Watson X, an evolution of our Watson brand, which specifically does that. It has our own foundation models, like large language model, that's, you know, very trusted and secure data. It's well trained, trying to remove all bias and, you know, making sure it's on ethical standards. But then we combine that with our clients' private data, you know, and combine the two, and then they're open to using the open source language models as well. So you get a real mix of that, you know, that intelligence that's helping drive, I guess, an on-brand type of experience, an experience that's appropriate for your and trained on your own data, which is key, and will obviously help differentiate the work that's out there and make it appropriate for the brand.
Yeah, I think that's the real promise for all of us, you know, as brand marketers, when we think about the amount of content, you know, that we all sit on, our brand design systems, and actually being able to take the promise of large language models, generative AI, and applying it to our data sets in a safe and secure way so that it's contextualized. That's where I think, you know, the magic is going to happen. And, you know, those 67% of the CMOs who want to start using generative AI, that's where, to Mark's point, the conversation needs to go now to make sure we're ready. Gordon, what are your thoughts? I know you're thinking even bigger in terms of, you know, it's not just changing the workflow and what we deliver today, but what type of new experiences and business models should we be able to deliver? And what are the implications of regulatory issues and how that might, you know, hinder or help where we're going?
Well, that's a nice, easy question, isn't it? Thank you for that. I think AI is going to be It's going to be in a lot of phases. So I think in the short term, in the medium term, it's going to be a massive productivity gain, which will definitely help existing businesses. There's no doubt about that. If you can work it into a workflow, you'll be able to do a lot more and be more productive. But I think if you did a bit of a thought experiment and said, well, if you've got a teenaged kid and you're advising that teenage kid what career to go into in this era of AI, would you be a solicitor or a lawyer? I don't know. Would you be a stockbroker? Would you go into insurance? Marketing's a great job, and there'll always be creatives. But one of the things we have to accept is these jobs are going to be a lot more competitive as more and more people come in. So whatever way you look at it, there are big changes coming, not necessarily. And I agree with you. I think people can suggest this is going to happen overnight. I don't think it will. I think it'll take quite a few years to work through the system. But I think it will happen eventually, that we will have to recalibrate society. Obviously, that at the moment, regulation is really interesting at the moment. Today, if you read the Times this morning, the London edition, is notable because there's 5 or 6 major articles in there all about AI. So they're looking at AI from a regulatory point of view. And so Britain's talking about having its own regulation, which I think is probably a waste of time. There's an old Indian proverb that says that 2 fleas, people arguing over regulation of AI is like 2 fleas in the back of a dog arguing about who owns the dog. One jurisdiction is too small to regulate this, and that'll probably fail. I think maybe even if the US and Europe got together, there's some regulatory risks, because I don't think I don't think China's going to join in that game, for example. I think there'll be sort of people looking for competitive advantage, which inevitably means development of AI is going to sort of grow exponentially. There's some discussion about putting sort of a CERN-like or a nuclear regulatory force in the UK. We will try and regulate access to microchips and try and control it that way. That's an interesting discussion, but one of the big problems of regulation is also the open nature of it. If you're creating these, open platforms, how on earth do you regulate that? So I think regulation is going to be a big battle. The upside of the regulation is it might just put guardrails around it, which will save the human race from destruction. I actually think these fears are exaggerated, incidentally, but if you can put some guardrails around it, save the human race from destruction. But I think the big risk is they'll probably over-regulate, like they're talking about doing in the EU, which will actually damage the development and put us at competitive disadvantage. So I know that didn't answer your question, but...
It was a good attempt. So this time has flown by. Here's what I'd love to do. I would love for each of you to share your one takeaway, for all of us as marketers. What should we be thinking about? What's the main takeaway to get started now? And then I want to open it up for any questions.
Sure, I'll go. I think experimentation is the best advice. Explore. Use the tools. I think that to build on Gordon's last comment, I think that the risk that people have with all these new emerging platforms is just sort of the provenance of the underlying data and sort of the transparency of it and sort of where it's coming from and who owns that original content. So I think that that's probably one of the biggest risks in terms of doing consumer-facing work using these tools at this stage. Internally, we've been doing a lot of experimentation in terms of accelerating our own internal workflow and helping ideate ourselves with brainstorming and creating personas and storyboards and things like that. We are therefore, creating strategic partnerships with the likes of Adobe and others where we can trust some of the underlying data, the indemnification behind some of the generative art that they're creating to feel confident in actually putting it into the market. So that would be the one sort of word of caution, is just make sure that you know where the underlying data source is and that it's properly cleaned before you go and actually launch an actual brand activation. But don't wait. I guess you have to dive in now and start experimenting, at least internally with your own workflow.
So experiment, but do it safely. Mark, you?
Sure. I mean, look, I think always with new technology, the key thing is to focus in on manageable applications, right? And not try to boil the ocean or take on too much. Take a look at what we're doing. So I think I've outlined in communications, we've got generative AI writing news releases and helping pitches. You know, in research, we're helping it kind of assist in terms of analysis, right, and open-ended coding and kind of focus group digestion of material. And so again, we did open-endeds first, and now we can move to focus groups, and I think that'll help speed interesting analysis, you know, rather quickly. And then I think in you know, in media, you're going to look at how does it help personalization and understand people. How does it help really the process? We're creating what we call smart assets, right? And so that's assets that have been through what I always say the car wash, which is, you know, they've been through you know, computer assisted tagging, they've been through rating, right? The assets now have, you know, they're not just an asset, they have a value associated with it and a use associated with it. So I think those are some of the ways that we're applying generative AI, you know, coming out of the box.
Great. Gordon?
Well, I would say really enjoy Cannes, to be honest, because one of the issues with you know, something like AI, when we're all running our day-to-day businesses, we're back home in our offices or our bedrooms, wherever you are running the business these days, you tend to get caught in you look at these things in the context of your day-to-day business. You know, how I'm going to do a better email letter strategy, or how I'm going to use my data in a more interesting way. But ultimately, this is so much bigger than that. This will, new ideas like social media will emerge, which nobody has yet predicted. And I think what you should do at Cannes is try and clear your mind of the usual humdrum and frustrations of your normal business life and go out to these AI sessions and just try and start to reimagine what all of that's going to mean. It is definitely much more an opportunity than a threat. But to get the opportunity, I think we have to really stop looking at this in the context of the marketing industry as it looks at the moment.
Excellent. So let's see if there are any questions from the audience. Great.
My name is Lilith. Hello from Armenia, just in case. Would love to see you there. So I've started using AI daily, and it helps a lot. It really accelerates a lot of tasks. But one of the inevitable and a bit scary scenarios for me, and I want to hypothesize with you how you see it affecting the brand marketing sphere maybe in a decade, is that at some point there will be so much data that we've given to the companies and our devices. For example, I don't know how many minutes, hours I do something, then I go for a walk. So basically AI will know everything about me. And what happens if at some point AI understands me better than I do it? And if we communicate with one of you, AI understands each of us better than we when we communicate. How that can change the marketing campaigns, the way we approach communication. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I'll just say, I think that's in some ways the fallacy of AI, right? Humans are incredibly adaptable and changeable beyond any computer's recognition. And this is where the limitation of the computer acting on the past, even in its predictions of the future. For example, if we were setting topics for this panel last year, none of us would have said generative AI. So if my AI had predicted the panel, it would have been completely wrong. So I think it's a fallacy that we believe that the computer can understand us better than us. We're us, and we can change, and we do change, and we are far more adaptable than computers will give us credit for.
Yeah.
Long term, yes, but if it's short term, like I'm gonna wake up tomorrow and AI knows like my whole routine, what I'm gonna do, where I'm gonna go, so it can be much more targeted and like.
But I didn't need AI for that, right? I mean, realistically, generative AI isn't really helping. Like, I kind of knew your routine and when you got up. But my point is, you don't have to follow your routine. You will change it. But I think that we are, and I always try to differentiate between data that consumers should let marketers know, because it makes marketing cheaper, and data that you don't want marketers to know, right? Personal habits, healthcare, things like that, that you really have to zone. And I don't think we've done a good job. We've kind of lumped privacy together. Whereas marketing, if we did know your routine and we did know you were going for the walk and you did know that you might need sneakers because you walk 7 times a week, that's helpful to you, right? And so I don't know that we've done a good job at kind of distinguishing the two, but I don't know that we needed AI we were getting a lot of data anyway.
Yeah, but AI, I mean, respectively, I think we're already there. I think AI does already understand you better than you understand yourself. Anybody who's looked at a TikTok algorithm, for example, there's no doubt. But the one caveat is, in order to understand us, AI does actually need us. So it needs the real us. So it can't have an artificial version of us. It needs us for something to understand. And that's what I think the safety mechanism is. AI will always need us in order to understand us. If you take us out of the equation, AI collapses.
I see one more question before we wrap.
First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you and to Brand Innovators for kicking off Can. Really interesting topic. So thank you. I'm Laura. I'm with Trusted Media Brands. And so we are a publisher. We create content. And I'd love to hear, with this flood of additional content that's going to hit the world, where does trust and what does, from a specific brand or person or whatever, play, what role do you see that playing going forward?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. And I don't think it's a new issue because I think there's been so much nonsense on the internet that this has already become a big issue for publishers. And obviously this flood, I mean, we're going to get exponentially more nonsense on the internet. So I think there'll be a lot more emphasis on trusted brands, definitely. So I think media owners, trusted media owners like the New York Times or the BBC, or, they will have to invest more in their brands because people will look for these islands of objectivity and trust. And I think there's also lessons there for consumer brands as well. So I think it's a really good question.
I mean, I just want to say trust has plummeted generally, right? And trust has plummeted as things have become more politicized. And so, I mean, trust is look, trust is obviously important. Does it get more important? Well, it's what I really find is the distinction between people who live experiences and people who are just thinking about them, right? For people who live experiences, for whom their health care is a stretch, for whom a deductible is important, trust me, they understand how the real world works, and they actually have a better idea of who to trust and who not to. The problem is actually with elites, what I call the impressionable elites, who don't really care what their deductible is, don't really know what their health care is. They pay it anyway. They're so removed from the problems that who they trust matters so much because they don't really know, right, much more out of what they read. And that's where trust has really actually where it's really a big problem.
I think that with the rise of generative AI there's going to be a rise in skepticism too. People are going to be more on guard of what to trust and what not to trust, especially when you think about the rise in, deep fakes or, some of the artwork that is almost indiscernible from reality. So I think that there's going to be a shift in people just being on guard more. And I think what's going to then be the trusted brands are the ones that are going to reveal their data sources. There's going to be transparency in the underlying data that's informed whatever the content is, and explainability of their AI models. And I think that if there's almost that watermark, if you will, on all the work, then I think there'll be some built-in trust through that.
All right. Well, I think we're out of time. I just want to thank all three of you for a very lively discussion. I would encourage everyone, enjoy your time at Cannes, stay, ask our panelists any questions that you have, and please come back every morning for croissant and conversations. Thank you.